Hi everyone, welcome to Frankenstein's Fabrics mystery block. This is March's block, which is our snowball block. Sorry this one's a bit late, but March just was not going to happen. So this month what we're doing with the snowball block is we will only need 2 fabrics. So I have picked my pink cat print with pumpkins and my darkest pink that I have. Marking pen, rotary cutter, and if you have one, a 12.5-inch square ruler. If you don't, whatever ruler you have will be fine. You just might need to rearrange it a bit more. Just one thing I wanted to talk about with the snowball block is that there will be a step in this where we're going to actually prep something for another block if you decide to use that shape in future blocks. So it's up to you. It doesn't have to be a block for this project. It can be a block for another project that you're working on. So what I want to do is, first of all, iron and starch your fabrics. Cut a 12.5-inch square from your main fabric, and then I will talk to you about the contrasting fabric, and then we can work out what size you're going to cut those at, because there's a couple of different options there and I want to talk through those. So I'll rearrange everything and I'll be right back. So what I've done is I've cut my 12.5-inch square block, and I have arbitrarily picked the size of 4.5-inch square for my 4 small squares. Now this is where I wanted to talk to you about your different size squares. Now if you would like your snowball block to look more pointy, make a bigger square. So your square will come in and your tip will be where your square lines up on either side, there'll be like a pointy, so it'll be more like diamond shape. If you want it to look rounder, pick something more medium, and if you just want a touch of color, pick something smaller. So I would suggest that if you find the center of your square, so I'm just going to eyeball this, if you want your squares to meet up, this will turn it into a square in a square block, which is not what we're doing. So you need to take a step back from the center and say, so our half is 6.25. So if you came back to say 5.5 inch, that would give you a small gap in between your squares and give you a slightly pointed rounded snowball. If you came back between the 5 and say the 3-inch mark, that would give you a slightly more rounded off square. And if you just want a touch of the contrasting color, come back from the 2-inch mark and just do a tiny corner. So they're the 3 options for your sizes of your squares. Now you pick whatever size you want. I've picked 4.5 just because that was convenient for the fabric that I had. And I like this hot pink, so it's a good color. Now on camera, it does look a lot redder than it is in real life. My phone likes to play around with the colors a bit. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take each of these squares and I'm going to draw a line on the diagonal with my marking pen. Now if you've picked a fabric that's got a print, this will be on the wrong side of your fabric. So I'm drawing this line. Now what I also want to do from that line, and I have to decide which side I want to do here, is what I'm going to do is draw a second line. But I'm going to draw a second line on the top side of this. Now on the bottom squares it'll be on the bottom side, but on the top side, so I want to draw a line that is a 1/2 inch away from that line. So you can see that there in the light, and the reason for that will become clear in a little bit. So I'm going to draw the lines on all my squares like this. and then I'll pin those on and take everything over to the machine. Now this block's a nice and quick one, and it's great when you make lots of them together. And the other thing you can do that I didn't discuss before is for your main fabric, if you want to, you can pick something that you can fussy cut. So you can feature fabrics that maybe you don't want to chop up into smaller pieces. Maybe you've got something with a nice panel or something like that. Don't forget to put the lids back on your pens. Okay, so there we have our 4 corners. So I'm just going to pin these on. I'm just going to stick 1 pin in each, and then I will set up at the machine and show you the next step. Okay, so I'm all set up at my machine. I have got a Universal 80 needle in my machine. I am using white grey thread, light grey thread, just because so you can see on the camera, if you are using darker fabrics, use the coordinating thread. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my foot with my needle position, and I'm going to stitch on the first line that I drew, so the one that is on the diagonal of your square. So just go around and do all 4 of those. Now if you need more pins, by all means put more pins in. I'm not going to worry at this stage. I'm just using the default stitch on my machine, and my machine is a Janome Horizon 7700 QCP. Okay, and now for the next step, and this is the prep for a future block. On the second line that we drew, stitch a line, exactly what you just did, on all 4. The good thing with the snowball block too, if you do a whole quilt with this one block, you can control what joins up with what block, so that you will end up with a secondary pattern with your corners. So it's quite an interesting one to use, and it's a quick one. It's one of my favourites to feature fabrics, and it's one of my favourites if I need to do something quickly. Okay, so now we have stitched all 4 corners, both rows of stitching, and now for the tricky part. Okay, so now we have our block. It's all stitched. Now we're ready to trim and press, and we're nearly done. Now there are 2 options here. Depending on how comfortable or confident you feel, you can use your scissors to cut apart these blocks. If you don't and you want an accurate 1/4 of an inch, by all means use your rotary cutter and ruler. And to do that, put your 1/4 of an inch marking on the main seam line, and then cut with the rotary cutter so that you've cut halfway between the 2. This means that everything's nice and accurate, but if you're comfortable using your scissors and eyeballing it, go right ahead. Okay. So now we have this funny looking thing, and we have our 4 half square triangle blocks for a future project. They're all ready to go, and the only thing you will have to watch is if you've picked a print like mine where there's a direction and you need to keep that direction in a certain way. Otherwise, if it's just going into a scrappy quilt, it doesn't really matter. So these can be pressed, so you press your fabrics to the dark side. So when we press all this together, I'll show you that, and then just pop them in the box with your other blocks, and that way you can keep them in future if we need them, or save them for another project. So we'll just go over to the ironing board now and finish up at this block. Okay, so first I'm going to show you our small pieces. So all you need to do, if you want to, and I do recommend this for some things, you can set the seam. Now setting the seam means that you are heating up where this seam is, where your stitches are, and it just creates a nice little crisp edge. And then all you have to do is press the seam to the dark side. Now I like to use steam. Other teachers and that patchwork people don't like steam, but I do. Personal preference. So just make sure that everything has been rolled over and you don't have any rolls on your, and you have your block ready to go. So you can do that for all of them. And then just to the dark side, just a little bit of pressure. I can tell you that a new iron is on my list to purchase. Now, with triangles, you do not want to stretch them. So don't put your iron down and push. Don't put your iron down and stretch the fabric, and don't grab it with your fingers and pull it like this, because you can see that's where the bias is there and it's going to stretch. That will make your triangles inaccurate. So just go ahead and do them gently. Just a little bit of a pull on it so you can get the seam where you want it to sit. And that one I just did the wrong way because I wasn't paying attention. But you just flip it back and press it. Now these have all been starched, so they're nice and stiff. So they'll be nice and ready to go for our next step. Now with your main block, set the seams again. Now if you've used a pen or something that erases with heat, this will get rid of any lines that you've drawn as well. Mine wasn't. I think mine's a water one, so it'll come out when I wash it. So now flip your block over, pop your triangles out, and then just gently press them all to the dark. Now, if you were making a quilt with the repeat of this block, you would have, in order to get your seam junctions meeting up, you would have to alternate your dark fabric. So the next block that would be next to this would have to have a dark center and light edges. Press into the dark so that these seam junctions don't all face in the same direction and create too much bulk. Okay, one final check press on the front, and we have our block. So here we have our final check snowball block. We just check everything over so that there's no rolled seams here. Trim off any threads that are hanging off or anything like that. Now you can square up your block at this stage. You shouldn't have to. But you can if you need to, and just using your ruler from before, that's all good. So you can square it up if you have to, like if something's stretched a little bit. Sometimes the triangles will move a fraction, but you can fix that if you need to. But other than that, this block is ready to go into our box. So take my label, clip it to it. and it's in my box with the other ones. Now my clips are actually mucking up my laying the blocks out flat, but that's not a problem. So I've now got 3 blocks down, and we'll be back next month for April. Any guess as to what the block will be next month? Hopefully something where we can fiddle a little bit more. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.